All right, so let's have a look at DIY conversion optimization. So thanks to everyone for joining us. Just a tiny bit of background about myself and the presentation today. First off, the question, and not at a deep philosophical level, but why are we here? And basically, this is an area that was voted on after our last DIY webinar on SEO, and folks really wanted to learn a bit more about conversion optimization. So we're going to go through the process of sharing some information that I think will help folks get much better at this critically overlooked area. So my background is I'm a bit of a rare internet generalist in that I've been a full-time web marketer since 2001. And I've had the sort of, well, pleasure and a little bit of luck in terms of working in different companies and for different companies at a fairly senior level in a bunch of different areas: email marketing, advertising, search engine optimization, copywriting. Those are all areas that had the good fortune and I think too good luck of starting early in the industry, and yeah, working with some really large and successful companies in those areas. So why that's important is really just that it gives me a good opportunity to look at sort of companies and websites from a platform and channel agnostic perspective, kind of to look first at strategy, and then after looking at sort of strategy and goals, to look at what they should be doing in which channels, and also gives a good breadth of information to present today. So what to expect? Basically, we're going to try and deliver some plain English language helpful advice, and give you some practical insights. So if something's confusing, please just ask. And there's the question and answer panel that's open. Brian will be aggregating some of those questions for later on the more challenging topics. And then if there's any quick ones that pop up along the way, then we can answer as we go as well. So today's agenda, we're going to have a little look and define sort of what is conversion optimization. Then we're going to look at some of the critical elements before we move into some practical examples, including some live looks at some participant websites who are kind enough to share with us, and then we'll jump into some Q&A. And really, we're going to try and move through things fairly quickly, just so we can have some time for Q&A, and we can even bring up some more sites at that point as well if folks want to volunteer and jump in. We will be sending out slides and video link afterwards, so don't worry about noting down anything that's included in the slides, because we will send those. And yeah, let's jump right in. So conversion optimization. First off, what is conversion optimization? Basically, it's the process of getting a visitor from one step to the next. It's really as simple as that. It's getting somebody to do whatever the next step is that you want them to do in your process. That might include adding to cart, might include subscribing to your newsletter. They might be clicking a button to sign up for a free demo or for a consultation. They might simply be filling out a contact form. Basically, it's any action you want someone to take. And this truly isn't a new concept. It's really just a new name for it that's come out of course, the tech necessity of making confusing names for things. Basically, every time you go into a grocery store, you see examples of merchandising, as it's called offline, which is very similar to conversion optimization. So for instance, somebody realized, hey, we'll sell more chocolate bars and gum and mints if they're sitting right at the checkout. The end caps in a grocery store, the pricing, sort of anything you see in traditional retail is typically a highly refined version of conversion optimization for offline. So basically, we want to just figure out how the heck we're going to do that online. And question two, I mean, I think all of you probably feel you do need to worry about it a little bit since you're on here, but really, you know, in practical terms, for some companies, it's not absolutely critical. So for example, if your business comes mostly from networking referrals, it might be enough that your site represents you well and that it's easy to find out how to contact you on it. Like that might be good enough. And it's funny because in fact, going through this whole process of putting this together, as somebody that does get most of our business through referral and networking, realizing that we need to improve some of our own properties and practice what we preach a little bit better. But hey, nothing like a pandemic to force you online instead of doing work in person, hey? Anyhow, so on the flip side, if you are leveraging advertising, search engine optimization, social media, or any kind of traffic generating activity where you're sending new people to your website, and these are people that haven't been referred, they don't know anything about your company or your product. If you're sending that kind of traffic to your website and hoping to get them to take action, you absolutely need to dig into conversion optimization. In fact, it's really the first thing that you should look at before you send external traffic to a website. And again, so why is it so important? And again, touching on offline, in person, we typically do a great job of responding to direct feedback. Like if you've ever worked as a server or a clerk or really anywhere in customer service, a salesperson, you're face to face with people, you can see their expression, and you basically just naturally respond to feedback. And as you do that, you adapt and you improve over time. But of course, this natural process doesn't happen online. So we really need to learn some best practices and also do experimentation along the way. And I gotta say, we don't touch too much on testing and experimentation today just because it's a ridiculously complex topic. But we will focus a ton on the best practices, and anybody that's curious and has specific questions, more than welcome to answer them. More than welcome to ask them as well. And I'll do my best to answer them. Also, in terms of importance, it's really not uncommon at all to double or triple your conversion rates if you do optimization. In short, like I was saying a moment ago, it affects every single other piece of marketing you do, but it often gets overlooked. And it's interesting, I think back to years ago, the first software company I worked in, we did online downloadable trial software, which was awesome. It was like going to university to learn about web marketing, except such a program didn't exist. Got to wade in and just learn a ton. And I remember a year or so in having to make the case of investing several thousand dollars on some software and services to support conversion optimization. Now, this company did millions of dollars online and spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing. And so being sort of the slightly geeky introvert, of course, I did a spreadsheet to take to the meeting where I had to ask for the approval. And quite frankly, looking at spending a little bit on conversion optimization when compared to the return on investment, it was an absolutely ridiculous return on investment. It kind of became clear that it was the single most important thing that we should actually be doing at that time. Just basically looking at how a tiny investment really leverages and multiplies everything else that you're doing. And so challenges. Of course, there are some challenges to conversion optimization and thinking, particularly in regards to websites and homepages. Larger companies often have just a ton of conflicting priorities, whether it's different products, different divisions, different departments. And that's a lot of times you see that sort of reflected in a homepage that's just packed with way too much information, which is not going to be effective from a conversion standpoint. On the flip side, small companies have the advantage of being nimble. And in fact, small companies are typically way better equipped to implement conversion optimization because they have the ability to make decisions and prioritize without a ton of politics and back and forth. The challenge for smaller companies, though, is that they don't have enough traffic typically to do extensive A/B testing. And again, we won't dig too much into the testing today because it gets to be a bit too complex a topic, but definitely, again, following the best practices will get you a long way there. And once those are in place, be great to move on to the testing. And I'm also happy, I'm really approachable and happy to answer questions. So if folks get to a point where they're curious about how to take a next step, I'm here. So a little real-time example. You'll see from the date range on these sort of performance reports screenshotted from Google AdWords yesterday, showing two small clients that we have on the Jumpstart website of our business, two lawyers marketing the same type of service in a very similar market. In one case, one of them has a conversion rate of 1.75% and a cost per conversion of $431. And this is for people who have basically submitted information and become legitimate leads on the website. By contrast, the other one has a 4.91% conversion rate compared with 1.75 and has a cost per conversion of $101 per new lead. And in both cases, they convert their leads at a fairly high rate. And for the legal services they're offering, well, actually the 400 is way too high. Fortunately, we're getting a chance to take a stab at rebuilding a small website and landing page for them and aim to improve that. But the $100 in their case, right within the bounds of where it should be. And really, this is fairly typical. If you haven't done that process of conversion optimization, you're likely to be looking like the worst example rather than the best example. So getting started in conversion optimization. First off, gonna learn some best practices. Secondly, you're gonna find some great examples in your industry to learn from. That's the great thing about the internet is the web is so transparent. You can absolutely go out and find some people in your industry that are doing a great job. Minor caveat that you have to learn enough about it to be able to see that they're doing a good job, because there are lots of companies that don't do a good job in terms of conversion optimization. And then at that point, it's time to get to work. And I don't see anything in the Q&A up to this point. Does anybody have any questions? Creates a great pause for me to take a sip of coffee. Okay, no questions so far, so that's great. That's great. Either we're being very clear, or I've just confused the heck out of people, and everybody's paralyzed. So moving right along, we're going to chat about 5 critical elements of conversion optimization. And just to be clear, it's not like there's just 5 or anything, but this is sort of how I've organized it for this this situation. And just one quick. Here. Oh, there we go, perfect. So the 5 critical elements as we're defining them today, first off, and most importantly, really for everything you do in marketing, is to know your audience or audiences and really understand their needs and motivations, because that's going to be the foundation for every single thing that you do. So with that out of the way, there's number of other elements in no particular order, and we're going to have a deeper look at these as well. So I'm just going to go through quickly right now, but you need to build trust and familiarity with your audience. On your pages, you need to prioritize your content, and you really need to remove distractions. You also need to write benefit-driven, visitor-focused copy that is what I'd call skimmable. People are ridiculously impatient these days in terms of just the flood of information, and people don't want to have to wait. So you could have the most beautiful paragraphs of beautifully written copy that might not get read. Having sort of 3 to 5 bullets near the top of a page that clearly illustrate the benefits to the visitor. That's typically what it takes to get somebody's interest to a point where they will actually read your copy. So, and you definitely need to assume that somebody is just scrolling down the page looking for something. So there has to be stuff that appears really prominently there pop out. And then lastly you need a really clear, relevant, and compelling call to action. We'll talk a bit more about these call to actions in a moment. So we're going to use just a landing page example, but these principles really do apply to any page on your website. And just basically in short, again, we'll get into it further, but a landing page is really just a simplified page that usually works alongside advertising. So first off, knowing your audience. And again, demographics are really important. And I have folks, sort of funny because I work with people sometimes, I think of a recent person I met who had yet to do any advertising, who was in the very early stages of developing a website, and they wanted to talk about psychographics. And I mean, us advertising folk like to talk about all sorts of crazy concepts, but really just kind of wipe that stuff out of your mind early in the process. And demographics, psychographics, all that stuff, it is important. Don't get me wrong. But what you really need to figure out first is, what are people looking for? What specifically are they struggling with? What's the benefit that they really need? And then of course, what will they respond to? For instance, everybody would like somebody, and a great example in the trial software, every software company would love somebody just to come to their website and buy their software. That said, if what they try to get the visitor to do is to buy the software on their first visit, it's not going to happen. It's going to be ridiculously unsuccessful. So what they instead do is they point people towards starting a trial. So really, it is critical that you get on sort of a wavelength where what you're going to encourage someone to do is actually what they want to do and what they will do. And then ask questions like, what would stop them from taking action of your specific audience, and addressing those, just like they talk about in traditional sales and countering objections. You're not there in person, so you have to understand what the objections are of your audience and then make sure that they're addressed on that page. So in this example, the person who created this page understands that the audience visiting is having challenges managing multiple projects rather. It's as simple as that. And that says, make sure you aren't missing one of these building blocks. So they create a bit of a fear there as well. Jumping forwards into the building trust and familiarity. So there's a lot that goes into building trust, especially on somebody's first visit. Part of it is your branding, like your site has to look great. Ideally some social proof, like testimonials. There's what we call credibility indicators, and that's just basically anything on the page. It could be industry associations, it could be years in business. In this case, on this very example, we can see down below the credibility indicators that they're using are logos of clients. And if you look at that list, oh, L'Oreal and Google, oh, if they're serving them, well, of course I can trust them. And people don't go through that process. People don't decide whether they can trust them or not. It just sort of happens in their mind. And so essentially you need to have that happen as well when somebody arrives at your site, that they just have an experience that has the credibility that they just automatically trust you. And familiarity is really important. It's a bit more challenging. I mean, familiarity comes through repetition. So that's going to come through your overall advertising strategy. And that's where it's interesting too. If you have a significant ask for someone, if you want them to commit to something larger, you need to build that level of trust first. So somebody may actually need to see your ads multiple times before they click on one. And if you have a big request or a significant thing they have to do, they may even have to visit your site a few times before they do it. So this is where you really have to understand, is somebody going to take action on the first time they visit the website, or are they likely to sort of just get some information and hopefully come back again? And then you need to figure out sort of how to deal with that one way or the other. Prioritization and removal of distractions. So it's interesting. First off, in terms of removal of distractions, you can see in this landing page example, there's no navigation. That's obviously not practical on the main part of your website, but that is exactly why you see that on landing pages that you might go to, is to remove options. And this sounds crazy. And I remember sort of early in my career thinking, well, I'm doing my visitors or customers a service by presenting them all the options. Arguably, yes, but in practice, no. The more choices you give someone, the less likely they are to make a choice. So obviously there are situations where you have to give people different options, but really what you're looking to do is prioritize the most important things you want them to do, or thing in a perfect world. And if you understand your audience, you can also pick the thing that is the best thing and the most valuable thing for them to do, and have some synergy there and have that really work. And then the other thing is just from a sales perspective, you're really pitching them on something. You're trying to convince them that this one thing is the one thing that they should absolutely be doing right at this moment. If you have 20 different options or even 5 different options, you kind of gut your case that this thing is the single best thing they could do. So again, if possible, just the one call to action, which in this case is to enter your business email to get started for free. So moving right along, talk about benefit-driven and skimmable compelling copy. So again, the managing multiple projects shouldn't be a struggle. Clearly, in the case that the benefit is that managing multiple projects won't be a struggle with this one. And another point too, the way they have it written similar to that, if you know somebody's biggest pain point, ask it as a question. And it's funny because in my pre-web days, I worked in a print shop, had a digital print shop similar to a Kinko's, and the best performing brochure that we ever did was for a chiropractor, and the whole front of it, all it said was, got neck or back pain. And basically, this was in the days when people actually had brochures sitting out at the grocery store on these big racks that they'd get paid to be sitting on that. And essentially, that's the sort of thing where if you're walking by suffering from neck or back pain, you're going to stop and pick that up. And that's really the way the questions can work in terms of benefits. And in situations where you're addressing their problem, then it's sort of implicit in it that your solution will fit your product will have the benefit of fixing that question. Also, there's tons of debate over long copy and short copy, and I have some personal preferences, but at the end of the day, long copy is just fine for those who want to, for the people who want more information and want to scroll through lots of information. But it's absolutely critical to include the main benefits and the call to action above the fold, as they used to say in the newspaper days, or rather visible on the screen. Essentially, if you want to drive a conversion, and there's exceptions to all of this, of course, but in general, if you want to drive a conversion, have that copy visible above the fold along with the call to action, and that will typically get the best result. And interestingly too, back in the days of working in trial software, had the benefit of sending out millions and millions of permission emails, which enabled us to test tons of different landing pages. And we did put that short copy versus long copy thing to the test. And at the end of the day, we found that longer by itself didn't work better, but longer, as long as the first screen could totally stand alone, was the absolute best. So short by itself wasn't perfect, long by itself wasn't perfect, but this hybrid where you present the first screen as if it were a single page and then can scroll down to whatever level of detail you have with calls to action interspersed throughout, that was, in that case, absolutely the most effective. These days, of course, mobile brings some challenges, but we won't go too deep into that at the moment. But suffice to say that the same principles work. You're just dealing with much less real estate. And then, of course, so you want your clear and compelling call to action. And so in this case, again, that's the get started for free. You don't want to make it too big of an ask. If you're doing forms, and we'll look at some forms later, but if you're doing forms, keep them short or strategically break them into stages. And essentially, the more information you ask for somebody in a form, the less submissions you'll get. In some cases, like if you have a sales team that's absolutely overwhelmed with form submissions or inquiries, you might strategically make it longer to get more qualified people filling out. The most motivated and qualified people will then be the ones to fill it out. but it's rare that having too many submissions is a problem. You want to provide some context, you want to make it compelling, and again, as I mentioned before, you want to remove all the reasons to say no. And in this case, it's really easy to do that just simply because it's free. So there's really no particular reason to say no. Other than if they weren't a somewhat known or prominent company, you would maybe have to make it clear what your privacy policy was, because that might be a reason that somebody would say no. Be like, oh, I'm not going to put my email address in. They're just going to spam me. So for some companies, it would make sense to have that in there. So here's an example, after chatting, here's an example of an optimized page. This is an industry that we've worked in for a bit over the years, and that's online mortgages. And so this True North Mortgage, they do a great job. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to apply now, or are you going to view all rates? It's one thing or another. If someone's ready to apply, they'll apply. If they want to see more rates, they'll see more rates. They have picked the most popular term, the 5-year, and they're also posting just a fantastic interest rate, no fees, unbeatable rates, renowned for service. Why wouldn't you carry on from that page? And I'm going to contrast that with Toronto Dominion Banks. Let's have a look at their mortgage page. First off, I mean, the current crisis is obviously critical. Whether or not they needed to have that right at the top and then push everything else halfway down is another question. But then even sort of going further, you kind of look at it, it's like, oh, well, there's all these different things I can do. So for instance, True North, I guarantee, I know for a fact they've done extensive testing, so they'll have realized that it's better to get people into the application process sooner or get them off to see rates. Here there's like 4 different choices. And it's like, okay, well, maybe what if I do sort of click through? That's like, oh, I sort of click through and it's like, I've got another page. This page above the fold here on the first screen, not including the navigation up top, there are actually 10 different actions visible that you could click on, including the ones that are kind of halfway cut off there. And if you scroll on the page, they actually make 19 different options that you can do as a next step. Suffice to say, well, I guess with the billions that TD profits, they can afford to do a bad job of it. But suffice to say that that True North example is going to be many multiples more effective than this TD example. So, any questions on critical elements before we go further?
I might ask a question, Rob, if I.
Yeah.
Or,
please.
Well, we're talking a lot about landing pages and conversion, and I think we're speaking a lot about landing pages specific with to advertising campaigns. Is there a difference how you might optimize a landing page for a paid campaign versus an organic search campaign?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, we are going to jump into websites in a moment. The biggest thing I'd say is maybe not paid versus search, but paid where you have a specific objective and something specific you're advertising and can take somebody to a landing page. Paid versus general sort of general visits. So for instance, a software company, for example, obviously on their homepage, they're going to need links to support, they're going to need links to multiple products. So you do really have to provide that full range of things, just bearing in mind you want to keep that prioritization going. And we will jump on that in a moment. So with that in mind, let's just have a quick little look and finish up on landing pages. So basically, we have sort of used that landing page example. And so really, what is a landing page? And it is a standalone page that's usually used for advertising and promotion. And the reason why we use it is that, well, for one thing, you can test multiple versions of your page without confusing your visitors. Also, because you know exactly, and search advertising is a great example. If somebody is searching best term rate for best 10-year mortgage rate versus best 5-year mortgage rate, you could actually have 2 almost identical landing pages, one for 5-year and one for 10-year, because you know which they're coming from. So in that case, you're just not going to have those multiple pages readily visible on your site, you're going to kind of have them tucked away on these landing pages to avoid confusing people. And you're also going to confuse the heck out of Google if you have, gosh, I mean, some clients we've worked with, they have 20 or 30 different landing pages that are actually very similar, except just catering to the specific type of visitor that are coming. And that would be horrible from a search engine optimization perspective if they were a part of your main site. And basically, it's a super streamlined funnel. And backing up, of course, a landing page is technically whatever page a person arrives at on your website. But as known in the industry now, a landing page is sort of a standalone, super streamlined page. And this is where sort of Unbounce and ClickFunnels and Lead Pages and these sort of companies have come from. And they basically have popped up for marketing teams that don't have great access to web resources to bang out multiple different landing pages. So they basically make the process really simple for creating them. There are definitely some strategies on making it very practical to build your own landing pages, but we can maybe touch on that a bit more later. So moving along, and here's an example. You know, again, this is one of my favorite landing pages. And in it, can we spot the 5 elements? Do these folks know their audience? So I'm going to assume it's like, yeah, their audience wants to increase productivity and has a need for collaboration and has challenges with how difficult platforms are to use. Are they building trust and familiarity? Yeah, there's sort of a couple of examples down here. They've got, they've got 3 million users. That's a great way of establishing, sharing that 3 million users, 70,000 organizations, under 90 countries. And then again, they have all these logos down here that they have placed to build that trust and credibility. Are they prioritizing their content and removing distractions? They absolutely are. There is really only the one call to action. And you know, I mentioned that thing about the privacy policy. They do actually have a link to their privacy policy in case folks are concerned. Is the copy benefit driven and skimmable? Like, absolutely. There's all of 2 sentences. And lastly, that clear, relevant, and compelling call to action. Just trying it for free. So again, we won't get bogged down anymore in landing pages, but what we're going to touch on now is looking at sort of the multi-step process before, and we're just going to cover this quickly before we move on to websites rather. But looking at a multi-step process, and this would be similar to the example that I gave around a more sophisticated process like a trial software download or a demo appointment or something like that. And it's really the difference. What we're looking at here is it's the process of looking at the whole path instead of just a single page. So again, and it's pretty simple, and this is kind of funny because this is really common sense. And I've given a software example in here that we actually did a review for before, but essentially, basically go to the start of whatever the process of discovery is going to be for a visitor or customer. That might be Google search. And then you just basically click through each step in the process somebody has to go through to reach successful completion. Along the way, if you're going to review your own multi-step process from a conversion perspective, just capture a screenshot at each stage, paste it into Word or whatever you want to paste it into, add a few notes about it, add notes on the challenges, add notes on some opportunities or improvements that you see. And I guarantee, absolutely guarantee that if you can do a good job of pretending that you know nothing about your company, which quite frankly is hard to do, so maybe you recruit somebody that doesn't work immediately within the company. But again, this is something that anybody can do. You don't have to be an expert or a pro. Just go through it with the goal of completing a process and see what you come up with. And so in a e-commerce example, and I'm using a simple example like a discretionary purchase, and by that I mean a purchase of a price that somebody would just do it on the spur of the moment, not a purchase that requires a whole bunch of research and back and forth. That would be a much more sophisticated process that would also be worth looking into. So again, somebody might start in Google search or see an ad, they click through, they might land on the homepage. Ideally, if you're advertising a product, you want somebody to land on the product page, not the home page. And often in terms of talking about landing pages for individual products in e-commerce, if you've done a good job on your product pages, quite often you do just use the product page as your landing page, even for more sophisticated efforts. So anyhow, somebody lands on the home page, gets to the product page. Ideally, they're going to review that page and decide to purchase. So there's some questions that come up like, did you provide enough information on the page to make that full decision? Did somebody have to go off somewhere to look at your return policy or your guarantee or anything like that? Or the shipping? Do they know what's going to happen with shipping? Do they basically want to make sure there's enough information there to make the decision? They add to cart. Is there anything confusing? They click, they put in their shipping info. They make that final purchase click. They get a confirmation page that pops up, then a confirmation email, then an email that something's shipped. Through that process, are there any opportunities to decrease the likelihood of a return, or are there any opportunities for upsells? Any opportunities to really set expectations for what's going to happen and when something's going to arrive to reduce the extent of any support calls? All sorts of opportunities there. And but this one, again, is a real example. It's kind of funny because it's for a global software manufacturer that does accounting software. You would absolutely know who they are. And we had actually led a few years ago the process of doing a conversion review for them of their process. And in that case, started with a search result, carried on to their landing page. There were calls to action. There was actually 5 calls to action, which was way too many. There's a registration form. There's an unlock email for this trial software. There's the download process somebody has to go through. There's an install process. Then you have to activate the installation. Then there's user instruction. Then there's conversion emails where they're prompting you to buy. And then there's end of trial email. And there are even some other steps along the way. And for larger companies, you don't want to measure, test, and optimize conversion rates for every single step in that process. And kind of why. And really, I actually whipped out the spreadsheet for a moment just yesterday to double check. And a 10% improvement in each of those steps would result in a 200% plus improvement in results. And if you haven't gone through the process, I'd be willing to bet that you could improve, even just applying best practices, you can improve each step by more than 10%. And then through testing over time, even better than that. And funny example in this case is these folks had 5 different departments that were involved in different steps of this process. So there was like marketing, there was like development, there's the product managers, and support. They were all in there, and they had individually done different parts of the process. So there were numerous things where it's like, go to the download process and it says one thing, and then get to the install process and the instructions contradicted what it said in the previous step. And then the sort of conversion emails like point to different product options than what you'd been trialing. And it was quite comical. And the funny thing about that is that I'd be willing to bet that pretty much anybody in the audience could have gone through that step, gone through that process, taken the same screenshots that we did and identified the exact same challenges. Although it's funny, I still remember that phone call and walkthrough of the thing because they thought we were just brilliant. And it's just so funny because, again, I mean, I would love to think that, but in fact, really, it's just like, well, no, we're just we're the first person ever that just went through and documented each step in the process and has shown you these glaring errors that exist there. And as ridiculous as that sounds, I think you would find in your own process that any of us would, that there are issues and opportunities like that. And really the big thing is that if we're experts in our offering, in our business, we're blind to a lot of issues. We don't understand the level of knowledge that somebody new would have. And so you really do need that external support there. Just keeping an eye on time. I think we're doing pretty good. Time for a quick sip of coffee. Okay, so maybe that was more than a sip. So again, moving to quick steps to website conversion optimization. So first thing is to prioritize your pages, because you've got a whole website. Maybe you've got 5 pages, maybe you've got 50 pages, but they are not all of equal importance. So you need to figure out which pages are the most important. I mean, your homepage is going to be one. Your product pages are going to be important. Great thing to do is to get out Google Analytics and identify which are your most popular pages. You can also look at, we mentioned those steps in the process. You can also look at the steps in the process, and Google Analytics will tell you which ones have the highest abandonment rate. Which pages are people leaving from? So anyhow, get that prioritized list together, figure out which pages to address, and then this is really simple. Again, it's common sense. It's absolutely, I mean, it helps to have some professional experience, but at the end of the day, it is just common sense, and understanding your customer is absolutely the most thing. So you're gonna look at, well, who's gonna be arriving at each page? Who's the most important visitor that's gonna be arriving? What's their most logical next step from each page? And at that point, it's really simple. Okay, well, let's make our language, let's use those 5 critical elements. Let's make the language reflect why somebody came to the page, and let's gently steer them to that next logical step. It truly is that simple, or rather should be that simple. So a few notes as well. Typically with homepage optimization specifically, less is usually more. There are some exceptions, but yes, less is usually more on a single screen. Again, you want to prioritize the visitor's next steps before designing the page, not trying to fit it in afterwards. And again, be really strategic there. You want to make you have different rows and columns and features on the page that'll be steering people to different places on the site. And you want to make the size and placement of each of those rows and columns. You want to make that so that it matches your priorities. You probably want to rethink your use of sliders, which of course is where you have these great big, lovely hero images at the top of your homepage that scroll through with a series of messages. They can be great from brand, but they're pretty typically awful from a conversion perspective. Like if you have 5 slides that show up, the likelihood of somebody seeing that third one is really low. And so again, quite frankly, it also hurts the performance of the web page from a speed and loading perspective, typically. So I would really think, I'm not saying never use a slider. I mean, in fact, we use sliders all the time, but you want to rethink the use of them. If something is a priority, it has to be visible on the page at pretty much all times. And something to think of too is whatever the top priorities are on your homepage, or any page for that matter, somebody should not need to use your top navigation to access whatever those next steps are that are embodied by the top priorities. So here's a funny example. Salesforce, ridiculously successful company, but again, I think they're in a position where they have I'm just switching to a live browser. So unless I am wanting to see their rapid response solutions, and to be fair, that might be their top priority right now, but I'm kind of confused. There's not really much to click on except customer success stories, so, well, let me just go look at, whoa, oh my God. In terms of prioritization and narrowing choices, this is just crazy. And then looking at a similar industry, Smartsheet, doing software as a service software as well. Interestingly, they also have those COVID resources available right now. But it's simply, there's really only 2 choices here. The way they've presented the information, you're either gonna look at the resources or you're gonna try the product for free. So again, they've basically applied landing page principles to their homepage, which is interesting too. Going back to that True North Mortgage example that I gave, I was watching them quite closely at a point where they went from doing a super streamlined landing page and then actually just started applying their landing page principles to their homepage to the point where they don't even always use a landing page anymore. Sometimes they just send even advertising traffic to this homepage. Here's a personal example. This is obviously much smaller scale and smaller level, but not a big deal, but 22 new contacts for our MailChimp newsletter over the last 30 days. And virtually all of it is due to people coming to read a post. And we have a simple call to action on all our blog posts. And being locked in has sort of renewed our our blogging efforts quite a bit. But again, nonetheless, even for a small company like us, 22 new subscribers a month, we can definitely improve on that. But that's 250 new people a year, if my math is all right, which is great. Inbound marketing pages. If you're attracting people with educational content and getting them to sign up, absolutely, you got to ensure your landing pages, forms, and follow-up is optimized. And this Flywheel example is really good. Quite frankly, they got us on their hosting. We now have, I think, 80 sites hosted on Flywheel, and they captured me by showing it was an ad for remove all your WordPress hosting headaches that popped up at a time when we were absolutely having WordPress hosting headaches. So long story short, this stuff works, but only if it's optimized. And actually, I would say if you're curious about their whole process, I would go to Flywheel and find one of these inbound marketing pieces and just go through the process. E-commerce product pages, we won't go too deep, but essentially you basically need everything on there. You need the currency, and actually just somebody I was chatting with last week who's selling here in Canada, where our currency is currently trading at a massive discount compared to the US. They didn't have it noted that they were Canadian dollars. So currency, all the purchase options, shipping and return policies, just have all those available so folks don't need to leave the page. And so now we've got a few live examples from the brave folks who submitted. So I've just got to get a couple screens up on my page here. So Viridian Energy is a solar power provider here in British Columbia. Really great company. This is their homepage. So focus on residential right now and kind of go to the page. And again, I look and I see, again, the whole crisis right now is critically important and in fact, really relevant to this company from a marketing perspective. I mean, in times of crisis, people really do start thinking about energy independence and solutions there. But this isn't going to be super relevant for first-time visitors. So it's kind of like, is it right for me? Renewable power now? Yeah, kind of thinking about that. That's not necessarily a specific benefit. Kind of keep scrolling. Why go solar? Hey, there is clean, local, renewable energy, provide return on investment, energy independence. Yeah, I would love to tighten that up a tiny bit, but really these benefits to the end user should be what's appearing way up here higher on the page. And then looking to the residential page, if somebody was interested in that area, this is good information. But this is where it's company-centric around the technologies versus benefit-centric for the consumers. So I would love to see something where this speaks specifically to the benefit, like if I understand it correctly, I guess those are the off-grid, for instance, would be, be totally independent of power from BC Hydro. I mean, that might be it. And again, being a layperson who knows a tiny bit about it, but that doesn't really mean a whole ton. And what really would be impactful, and this is some interesting recent experience, we've recently made the move to save a whole bunch of electrical energy in our own home by installing a heat pump. And I remember what got us on the whole process of doing it was had somebody in servicing our electric boiler, and they started talking about natural gas solutions. And they're like, oh, well, actually we can install a natural gas solution that will actually save you money even if you borrow the money to put it in place because of how much your energy bills will go down. And we didn't end up going with gas in particular, but it's just that value equation is like, oh, well, that's obvious. So what I'd love to see, if favorable, is perhaps an energy calculator or a savings calculator. If you can show that it's actually cost neutral or near to cost neutral and make that case, that becomes just incredibly more compelling, and then gives somebody the motivation to learn about the different options and this. And again, I would definitely look at labeling the options as the benefit and then get into the technology. So another site that was shared with us is this Flathouse. And this is interesting. I would love to see, we're going to see a great example of this in a couple moments, but I would love to see in this example something stating exactly what this service or sort of what these products are. And even having recently done a kitchen renovation, it's kind of like a question of, figuring out, I wasn't quite clear what exactly was involved. And if you go shop and kitchen, and to be fair, I recognize that it does mention down below on the page what it does, but again, having that one sentence to create context would be huge. And again, looking sort of through here, I'm still not features, flooring options and tile and grout color, hardwood. And again, what I understand now that this is basically a design that includes all these different elements so that you can have an incredibly stylish kitchen without having to spend a whole bunch of money on a designer or design process. But that benefit statement never quite made it through. So I'd just love to see that in there. A couple other things is I think to get that credibility and confidence, really need to have, and it's possible it is there, but really need to have some pictures of finished rooms where they've done this, and some testimonials from actual clients who just love the results. I think those two things are going to be super critical before reaching anywhere near the potential with this. Yeah, so that's that one. Moving forwards, we've got Edward's technical writing, and just again, these are just some quick sort of brainstorms on sort of what folks might look at. Technical writing service. This is great, obviously well written. That said, it's probably fine for the market, and given the competitive landscape in this field, it's probably fine, but I would love to see a little bit more modern and polished appearance on the website. Up top, I'd love to see supporting art, science, and business. Those are three very diverse things. I think that it's great to support those areas, but I think you could just remove those because having all three kind of diminishes the value of pointing to them, because it's basically for everybody. I mean, short of government and education are pretty much the only ones left out of there, and they probably apply as well. So definitely I would narrow that down. In general, sort of talk a lot about qualifications. One thing I would encourage is just to, the qualifications are important, but having a bit of swagger and assuming that folks will accept that you're delivering things like sort of producing high quality documents. Like that's kind of the price to play. So you definitely want to just have the confidence and understand that if you show confidence, that folks will assume that those sort of things are included as part of the service. If they weren't, they wouldn't even be on your site. And then what I would love to see is scrolling through, can go down and see that there's, deliverables and grant proposals, business proposals, policy, user guides, training manuals. What I would absolutely love to see is some benefits really high on the page. So you might have some bullets that say things like, win more proposals through concise strategic writing. Might have increased user satisfaction with clear guides and manuals. Perhaps get your points across in your reports and manuscripts. Basically, everybody knows what a writer does. What's really important is for you to differentiate yourself and illustrate how you will actually help them. And then another quick one. I love this site. Beautiful, beautiful site. We design beautiful packaging. They've done just a magnificent job of showing what they do, and the benefit, although not stated, is definitely implicit in there. And I think that the customers will understand that. Again, just a lovely, lovely site. Sort of poking through it, sort of look at the navigation and see, oh, there's paperboard, tin, plastic, and formed cases as the main types of products. So that would be really the one big thing I would have, would be to have those 4 options possibly in a row on the page here. Because I think a lot of buyers are going to quickly self-identify with one of those 4 if they're qualified and actually ready to do something, and then they'll click directly through it. So having those 4 different options somewhere on the homepage would be great. And then lastly, just the tell us about your project, request a quote. I'd be really tempted to reduce the barrier to entry there. Requesting a quote is a fairly formal thing, and there's an expectation that there's going to be a discussion about sales, that you're committing to at least having a call on being sold the project. There'd be a lot of people that could be potential clients that just aren't quite ready at that point. So even just like ask a question about packaging or questions about our services, just ask and have a button to click through on that. And kind of looking now at about 2 minutes to 11, I think that's a good point to wrap up our examples. So we'll go on to Q&A, and again, I recognize it's almost 11, but we're happy to stay and answer any questions. And moving on to Q&A, but first, a short word from our sponsor. So Plus ROI, we've got 2 divisions. Our first division, which has been going for 13 years now, Plus ROI Online Marketing. We're basically a performance-focused multi-channel digital agency. We've got a world-class team, and we work basically for any company that's looking to boost sales or leads using any and all sort of web marketing channels, with a real focus on performance and measurement and monthly improvement. Jumpstart Web, basically we offer streamlined ad services through Jumpstart Web, and that's for people reaching local markets. So that'd be like lawyers, chiropractors, auto dealers, retailers, sort of that sort of thing. Really great breadth of service on both sides of the business. And if you have any questions, please just reach out to me directly through my email. I'm always open to connecting on LinkedIn to folks that have a mutual interest. And I would really encourage you, if you have any questions at all, please just get in touch. I don't bite, and I am really happy to answer questions about web marketing without subjecting you to any sort of sales pitch or anything like that. And yeah, lastly, we will definitely be sending out the slides and video. And the other thing too is, if you know anybody that could possibly benefit from our services, happy to answer questions for anybody else that you might know who'd be interested in chatting. So again, off to question and answer. We have one question asked and answered already, and
well, with that one question, they were wondering about our favorite landing page builders, and we might expand that to any of our favorite tools that we use for landing page optimization.
Well, yeah, and maybe I'll first touch on that quickly, just in terms of, I mean, all those third-party landing page builders I mentioned are good. I would really look at it from a perspective of which one meets your budget the best, but they've all got good features. I mean, Unbounce, kind of the first one probably that I use, and I really like it, but the others are good. One thing I would mention is that they all have marketing automation built on the back end. All those they're all typically now kind of range from $60 to $150 a month. So they're actually not cheap. So that's where, if, for instance, if you're on a WordPress platform, all the things that you can do on there can be done on WordPress. So I'd strongly recommend looking and seeing if you're able to get a simple landing page template built right on your WordPress site. you can then duplicate that quickly and do tons of variations of landing pages without having to pay that monthly subscription fee, and also have it integrated right on your main domain. Alternately, yeah, so, and you know what, Ryan, I should ask you what, for folks that aren't using one of those automated platforms, what do you think the best testing tool is right now?
Well, yeah, and I'll also add, if you've got the resources to do things within your own CMS for landing pages, I find another bit of trouble we sometimes come across with landing page tools is tracking them properly. Oftentimes they're set up on a different domain, or so there's lots of tracking issues that go on there. We've had success with several of them, Unbalanced, Lead Pages, that kind of thing. But and Lead Pages has a pretty good WordPress integration to help get those on your site. But yeah, that's another thing to consider if you can do them there. We use well, there's Google Optimize is free and fairly powerful and easy to use. If you're looking to do A/B tests, which are just testing, say, a different headline. You don't even necessarily need to create a whole new landing page to do that. It's just a little bit of bit of code that you stick on your website, and then you can do it all within the platform. And if you're using Google Tag Manager, which we covered a little bit last time, it's even easier. So that's another good one to use. Yeah, and we have other little, especially if you're kind of in that WordPress environment, there's lots of little plugins to help you with certain things. Like, if you want to try, for example, an exit pop-up, that's when somebody goes to close your browser, they get a little, hey, wait, here's an offer or something like that. There's lots of little tools for that. Another one that's good is OneSignal, which does their browser optimizations. But we found for some of our clients have gotten those are when people click opt in to receive notifications for the site, and then when you publish something new, like a sale, people get a little banner that pops up in their windows, just in their desktop. And we found some good things there, and those are all free. Those are the ones that come to mind most. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. We just had a question from Jim about who's used Unbounce a lot and is wondering which platform we'd recommend for A/B testing WordPress sites. And I think Ryan had mentioned using the Google Optimize. A couple other options, if you're heavily AdWords focused, there are experiments within AdWords, and something that we've done for our sort of smaller clients that don't want to invest in sort of setting up the more complex testing is you can actually do a bit of a hack in AdWords and just create basically two identical ads, set the distribution to show the ads evenly, and then at that point just have a different URL in each of the ads. And that doesn't get you the absolute true random variation, but it is a super quick, super cost-effective way, and a majority of the times that it will get you accurate results in terms of which landing page is working better than the other. Do we have any more questions?
I think we're a bit slow there. One thing that I came to mind might be beneficial to talk about a little bit is how important do you find website loading times to be for conversion optimization?
Yeah, no, and that's fantastic question that, quite frankly, probably should be part of the presentation. So obviously can't cover everything at once. I think the stats on speed are crazy, and basically, if your page takes longer than about 3 seconds to load, you more or less shouldn't be advertising until you get to a point where it's loading faster. And I know Amazon used to publish information on how Amazon, I think Google as well, are publishing information on the loss of conversion and the abandonment rate, and basically tenths of seconds sort of matter past that 2 or 3 second mark to a point where it absolutely should probably be the first thing that's considered. And that's an interesting question. I'm going to look up that stat as well, just so I can share something. I think
I've seen a report. I've seen a report recently from Cloudflare, which tracks a lot of speed, that difference of between about 2.5 seconds to 5 seconds will actually double your conversion rate. So that's and that's sometimes something that can be easily done, especially if you're running a WordPress site. You might have something running 5 or 6, 10 seconds, and then with a few little simple speed optimizations or a change in your host, you can bring that down to 3 seconds or less, sometimes even under 2. And if that's going to double your conversion rate, that could be a quick win.
Cool. All right. Well, I think still got a decent group, but I think folks are starting to drop off a bit. We don't have any more questions, so I think with that, just like to thank you again for taking the time today. Hope you found the information helpful. We will send out a bit of a poll along with the slides and whatnot. So hopefully you fill that out. And thanks very much again. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one.